Hi students, welcome to the lecture. Today we will be dealing with Cobb Douglas production function. So without much delay, let's move on to the topic Cobb Douglas production function. What is Cobb Douglas production function? It is based on the empirical study of the American manufacturing industry made by Paul H. Douglas and C. W. Cobb. So, this Cobb Douglas production function is based on an empirical study conducted by Paul H. Douglas and C. W. Cobb based on the American manufacturing industry. And they found out that this Cobb Douglas production function, or the production function which was found by Paul H. Douglas and C. W. Cobb, is a linear homogeneous production function of degree 1. What is a homogeneous function? In terms of homogeneous function, we have both independent variables as well as dependent variables. When we increase independent variables by k amount, the same should be resulted in the dependent variables in the same way, that is k amount. For example, if input is increased by 2 times, the output should also be produced with an increase of 2 times. So that is what we call as homogeneous function. So in this case, Cobb Douglas production function was also a linear homogeneous production function of degree 1. Okay, then which takes into account two inputs. That is, this Cobb Douglas production function takes into account mainly two inputs. We know that for a production, there is many inputs like raw materials, labors, technology, capital, etc. Among this, here in the Cobb Douglas production function, we are taking mainly two inputs, that is labor and capital, for the entire output for the manufacturing industry. That is, we had already seen that in the Cobb Douglas production function, we are taking into account the American manufacturing industry, and we are considering two inputs only in this production function, that is labor as well as capital. So the general form of Cobb Douglas production function is Q is equal to A into L raised to alpha and C raised to beta. Okay, this is the general form of Cobb Douglas production function. Here Q is the output and L and C are inputs of labor and capital respectively. That is, here we can see that Q is equal to A into L raised to alpha and C raised to beta. And here Q is the dependent variable and L and C are the independent variables, which represents L for labor and C for capital. These are the inputs which is used in the production. And capital letter A, alpha and beta are positive parameters. So here we can see that A into L raised to alpha and C raised to beta. Here A, alpha and beta are positive parameters. Here we can see that alpha is greater than 0 and also beta, which is also greater than 0. Okay, then the equation tells that output depends directly on labor and capital, and that part of output which cannot be explained by labor and capital is explained by A, which is the residual, often called technical change. We already came to know that in the Cobb Douglas production function, we are mainly taking two inputs, that is labor and capital. And there are some parts of the output which depends upon other factors than this labor and capital, and the other factors is determined with the letter A, and which is the residual, and this is often called technical change. So in this equation or this general form of Cobb Douglas production function, A represents the technical change. Okay, then the production function solved by Cobb Douglas had 1/4 contribution of capital to the increase in manufacturing industry and 3/4 of labor, so that Cobb Douglas production function is represented as Q is equal to A into L raised to 3 by 4 and C into C raised to 1 by 4. So we can see from this slide that production function of Cobb Douglas is mainly based on labor as well as capital, and in the case of American manufacturing industry, labor has a contribution of 1 by 4th and capital has a contribution of I'm sorry for that. 1 by 4th contribution is from the capital and 3 by 4th contribution is from the labor. That is, alpha is the contribution from the labor, which is equal to 3 by 4, and beta is the contribution from the capital and which is equal to 1 by 4. So we can restate the general equation of Cobb Douglas production function, that is Q is equal to A into L raised to alpha and C raised to beta. This can be replaced as Q is equal to A into L raised to 3 by 4, which is the contribution from labor, and C raised to 1 by 4, which is the contribution from capital. So I think it's clear for you. If you have any doubts, please kindly comment in the comment section. So from this equation, we can see that constant returns to scale is operating, and this is because the total of the values of labor and capital is equal to 1. Okay, so from this equation we can see that the contribution of labor is 3 by 4th and the contribution from capital is 1 by 4th, and when we add these contributions, that is 3 by 4 plus 1 by 4, we will be getting 1, which implies we will be having constant returns to scale from this production. Okay, then the coefficient of labor in the Cobb Douglas production function measures the percentage increase in the output that would result from a 1% increase in labor. We can see that here the contribution of labor is 3 by 4. Okay, so this increase is implied by the increase in output. Okay, that is, when there is an increase in the coefficient of labor, which is showed as the percentage increase in the output by 1% increase in that labor, we are holding at the same time capital as constant. Okay, similarly, beta is the percentage increase in the quantity or the output that would result from a 1% increase in capital. That is, when we increase or when we make capital greater or when we add capital in a more quantity, then what will be the percentage increase in output? This is beta. Okay, beta is the percentage increase in the output which is resulted from a 1% increase in the capital. So I think it's clear, and at the same time we are holding labor as constant. Okay, so we are taking only one at a time. If we are taking labor, we will be keeping capital as constant, and at the same time if we are taking capital, then we are keeping labor as constant. Okay, then the Cobb Douglas production function showing constant returns to scale is depicted in the figure. Labor input is taken on the horizontal axis and capital on the vertical axis. So we can see that in the next figure there will be a representation of this constant returns to scale, in which the graph shows labor input in the horizontal axis and capital on the vertical axis. That is, labor is on the x-axis and capital is on the y-axis. So in order to produce 100 units of output, that is OC, units of capital and OL units of labor are used. That is, in order to produce 100 units of output, OC capital and OL labor is needed. If the output is to be doubled, that is from 100 to 200, the inputs, that is labor and capital, will have to be doubled. That is, OC is exactly the double of OC1 and of OL2 is the double of OL2. Okay, that is, we can see this in the next figure. This figure shows constant returns to scale, in which, as we already saw in the slide, x-axis depicts the labor and y-axis depicts the capital. And here we can see that in order to produce 100 units of output, we require OL1 of labor and OC1 of capital. At the same time, when we are doubling this output, that is the output changes from 100 to 200, we require OL2 of labor and OC2 of capital. Okay, at the same time, we are increasing this in a proportionate manner. That is, if one is doubled, other is also doubled. That is, when input is increased at the same amount, output is also increased at the same amount. Okay, clear? So, similarly, if the output is raised to 300, that is, we had already seen the output is being 100 and it is increased to 200 and later it is increasing to 300. Then the units of labor and capital will be raised to threefold. That is, OC3 and OL3 are the 3 times larger than OC1 and OL1 respectively. Okay, that is, we can see that in the graph. Here in the graph, we can see that when the output is increased 3 times, then what happens? The labor used is OL3 and the capital used is OC3. Okay, then we can also see that this OL3 and OC3, OL3 and OC3 is equal to 3 times OL1 and OC1. Okay, that is, there is a 3 times increase in the output and thus there is 3 times increase in the inputs here. Okay. Then we can use another method for this, and that is to take the scale line or the expansion path connecting these equilibrium points Q, P and R. OS is the scale line or expansion path joining these points. It shows that the isochrones 100, 200 and 300 are equidistant. Thus, on the OS scale line, OQ is equal to QP is equal to PR, which shows that when the capital and labor are increased in equal proportions, the output also increases in the same proportion. So, another method is to see the expansion path or the scale. Here we can see that this OS represents what? The scale line or the expansion path. They are moving through the equilibrium points Q, P and R. And here we can see that OQ is equal to QP is equal to PR, which is representing the equidistance of isochrones 100, 200 and 300. That is, isochrone 100 is equidistant from isochrone 200 and isochrone 300 is also equidistant. Okay, from this we can see that the capital and labor is increased at the same amount and thus the output is also increased at the same quantity. Okay, or at the same ratio or at the same proportion. I think it's clear for you. If you have any doubts or clarifications, please kindly comment in the comment section below. Then we will be next dealing with the criticisms of Cobb Douglas production function. So the criticisms are here. First one, the Cobb Douglas production function is mainly criticized by Arrow, Chineri and Minhas and Solo, and their criticisms are listed one by one. The first one is the Cobb Douglas production function considers only 2 inputs. We have already seen that Cobb Douglas production function is only taking into account the labor and the capital, and the other inputs are not given much importance. Okay, that is, they neglects some important inputs, which include raw materials, which is used in production. We know that raw materials is very much necessary for a production to be taken. So if it is not considered, it is considered as a criticism to Cobb Douglas production function. So we cannot generalize this function to more than 2 inputs. Okay, then that is the first criticism. And the second one, in the Cobb Douglas production function, the problem of measurement of capital arises. Okay, there is a problem of measurement of capital, which is mainly because it takes only the quantity of capital available for production. Okay, then, but the fall the full use of the available capital can be made only in periods of full employment. This is unrealistic because no economy is always fully employed. So the problem with Cobb Douglas production function is that there is a problem of measurement of capital, which is mainly caused due to the quantity of capital is for production is only taking into account. Okay, then we can only take the full capital into account when there is full employment. As we all know that full employment is an unrealistic situation, we cannot take into account. Thus, Cobb Douglas production function is criticized due to the problem of measurement of capital. Okay, then we are moving to the next slide. Cobb Douglas production function is criticized mainly because it is considering constant returns to scale. In actual, production cannot be giving always this constant returns to scale. There is increasing or decreasing terms. So that is not taken into account in case of Cobb Douglas production function, which is adding more criticism to this production function. And the fourth one is Cobb Douglas production function is based on assumption of substitutability of factors and neglects the complementarity of factors. So we are giving more importance to substitutability of factors. That is, we are considering labor is increased in such amount, and then at the same time we are reducing the amount of capital to be used so that they can act as substitutes. Okay, but they are neglecting the complementarity of the factors. Then the fifth one is the production is based on the assumption of perfect competition. So we know that perfect competition is an unrealistic competition or market, so that we cannot take into account this perfect competition in actual sense. So as this production function is based on perfect market, this act as a criticism. Okay, then one of the weakness of Cobb Douglas production function is the aggregation problem. This problem arises when this function is applied to every firm in an industry and to the entire industry. So Cobb Douglas production function has also a problem of aggregation, and this can be seen when the function is applied to every firm in the industry and to the entire industry. In this situation, there will be many production functions of low or high aggregation. Thus, Cobb Douglas function does not measure what it aims at measuring. So what happens here is Cobb Douglas production function will not be accurately measuring for what it is aimed for. Then we are concluding the session. The conclusion. Thus, the practicability of Cobb Douglas production function in the manufacturing industry is doubtful proposition. So we had seen many criticisms regarding Cobb Douglas production function. So in the manufacturing industry, it has a doubtful position. This is not applicable to agriculture. So Cobb Douglas production function is not applicable to agriculture. Therefore, intense cultivation increasing the quantities of inputs will not raise the output proportionately. That is, for agriculture, we know that intensive production or intensive cultivation, when taken, there is a need for more inputs, and the output will not be increasing at the same proportion of adding inputs. So we cannot use agriculture as a method or agriculture as a factor which has influence of Cobb Douglas production function. Then, even then, it cannot be denied that constant returns to scale are a stage in the life of a firm, industry, or an economy. It is another thing that this stage may come after some time and for a short while. So we can see that there is increasing returns, constant returns, and diminishing returns. These are all the stages in which this constant returns to scale will be only operating for a short period of time. So we should understand that as a conclusion part. Okay, then moving on, we are now going to the importance of Cobb Douglas production function. So first one is it is widely used in empirical studies. So in the case of manufacturing industries, there should be a need of empirical studies, and we will be using this Cobb Douglas production function for that. And the second one, It is used to determine the relative shares of labor and capital in total output. That is, when an output or when a production is completed, we want to know that how much labor contributed to that particular output or how much the capital contributed to that. So the relative shares can be identified using this Cobb Douglas production function. And it is very necessary to prove Euler's theorem. Then the fourth one is its parameters alpha and beta represent elasticity coefficients that are used in intersectoral comparisons. So when we wanted to compare two sectors, we need elasticity coefficients. So this alpha and beta represents that. Then the fifth one is the production function is a linear homogeneous function with the degree 1, which shows constant returns to scale. That is already discussed. If it is so, alpha and beta is equal to 1, then there is an increasing returns to scale, and if alpha and beta is less than 1, there is a diminishing returns to scale. Okay, then the sixth one is economists have extended this production function to more than two variables. So, through this production function or through Cobb Douglas production function, economists further worked on that and they had used it as a measure to improve or to increase it to more inputs. So this is all about Cobb Douglas production function. We had seen what is Cobb Douglas production function, its graphical representation of constant returns to scale, and its criticisms and importance. So if you have any doubts regarding any of the portion which are taken, please kindly comment in the comment section. So also if you have any suggestions regarding any topic to be taken, that is also welcomed. Enjoy learning. God bless you all. Thank you.